18 months ago, I took a photo of my son at dinner. He didn't know I did it. He's sitting right next to me, food untouched, completely gone into that phone. And I'm looking at this kid I would do anything for, thinking, I have genuinely lost him. Not to drugs, not to bad friends, just to a screen. In my own house, while I'm sitting 3 feet away. That photo changed everything, because I did what every mom does. I Googled it, I yelled about it, I set screen time limits he found ways around in about 11 minutes. And none of it worked because I was fighting the symptom. What I didn't understand yet is that the research is really clear on this. You cannot out-restrict a dopamine loop. A 2022 study from Stanford found that teen screen dependency isn't a willpower problem, it's a replacement problem. Their brains are looking for something real to grab onto. And when there's nothing real available, the phone wins. Every time. I'm not a psychologist, I'm a mom who read too many studies at midnight and then made a lot of mistakes in her backyard before something finally clicked. But what clicked was backed by actual science, and it worked faster than anything I'd tried in 3 years of fighting this battle. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly what I built, what it cost, most of it under $200, and how within about 6 weeks my son went from someone I had to physically remove a phone from to a kid who came home from school and went straight outside. I'm also going to tell you the one thing I almost skipped that I now think was the entire reason it worked. But stay with me until I get to the part about failure, because my first attempt backfired completely, and the reason it backfired is probably the exact mistake you'd make too. If you skip to the setup without hearing that part, you're going to waste time and money, and your teen is going to use it against you forever. So let me show you what the backyard looked like before, because it was not impressive, and exactly where I started. The backyard before was nothing. A rectangle of mostly dead grass, a broken basketball hoop, and 3 years of my son telling me it was boring out there every time I suggested he go outside. And I want to be honest about where I was mentally at that point, because I think a lot of you are in the same place. I was past frustrated. I was into something closer to grief. Because I remembered this boy at 7 years old who would spend entire Saturdays building things in the dirt, who had opinions about bugs, who once cried because it rained and he couldn't go outside. And now he was 15, and I genuinely did not know how to reach him. I'd read the articles about screen addiction. I'd tried the tech-free weekends that turned into 4-hour standoffs. I'd done the family meeting where I explained calmly and with research citations why we were setting new boundaries. And he sat there, expressionless, nodding, and had his workarounds in place before I finished my coffee. What I hadn't understood yet, and this is the thing that changed my entire approach, is that I was treating this like a discipline problem when it was actually a vacuum problem. His brain wasn't choosing the phone over real life because the phone was more fun. His brain was choosing the phone because there was nothing in real life generating the specific neurological signal it had learned to need. Dopamine from mastery, dopamine from progress, dopamine from being genuinely competent at something that matters. TikTok delivers a version of that signal every 3 seconds. A dead backyard delivers nothing. I wasn't going to win by restricting the phone. I was going to win by building something better. And the key word there, the word I almost missed, was building. Not presenting, not offering, not arranging a nice outdoor experience for him. Building, together, with him in charge. The first attempt, and why it completely backfired. Here's the failure I promised you. And I'm telling you this in detail because I have seen this exact mistake in every parenting group I'm in, and I want to save you from it. My first attempt at the Homestead was a raised garden bed. I bought a beautiful cedar kit, I planned out what we'd grow, I picked the spot, I sourced the soil, and then I told my son we were doing this together as a family project. He helped me for about 40 minutes. He held a board while I drilled. He moved some bags of dirt. He said cool when I said we were going to grow tomatoes, and then he went inside. And that was essentially the last time he engaged with the garden at all. I'd planted things that were supposed to draw him in, hot peppers because he likes spicy food, sunflowers because they grow fast and look dramatic. I watered it every morning hoping he'd come out. He never did. The tomatoes came in beautifully and he ate them at dinner without comment. I almost gave up. But I kept thinking about something I'd read in research on adolescent motivation, specifically a study on teen engagement that found teenagers show dramatically higher sustained involvement in tasks where they are the primary decision maker and where failure is genuinely possible and genuinely consequential. The garden had failed as a hook because failure wasn't possible. If he ignored it, I would water it. The tomatoes would still come. Nothing bad would happen. There was no real skin in the game. And a teenage brain, especially a brain that has been conditioned by gaming and social media, where your choices have immediate visible consequences, does not engage with stakes that aren't real. I needed something that would die without him. And that's when I started researching chickens. The thing that actually worked, and the specific reason why. Now, before you click away because you don't have space for chickens, or you rent your home, or you live in an apartment, stay with me, because I'm going to tell you the exact psychological mechanism that made this work. And then, at the end of this section, I'm going to give you 4 other versions that use the same mechanism without a single feather involved. The chickens worked because of 3 things happening at the same time, and I want you to hear all 3 because if you only implement one of them, it probably won't stick. The first thing was real stakes. Living animals require care on a schedule that doesn't negotiate. They don't care that it's cold. They don't care that you stayed up late. They don't care that you'd rather be on your phone. They need water and food every single day, and if they don't get it, something suffers visibly. That's not my rule. That's just reality. And a 15-year-old who has been successfully routing around every rule I've ever made could not route around that one. The second thing was expertise. This is the piece I almost missed, and I now believe it was the most important piece. I did not learn about chickens before we got them. I told my son I needed him to figure it out and teach me. I gave him the research job. He spent 2 weeks, voluntarily, on his phone, watching YouTube videos about chicken breeds and coop design and predator proofing and feed ratios. He built a spreadsheet. He had opinions. When the chickens arrived, he was the expert in the house, and everyone knew it. Do you understand what that did to his brain? For 3 years, he'd been the problem in our house. The kid who wouldn't put the phone down. The kid I was worried about, managing, trying to fix. And then suddenly, he was the person I came to with questions. That shift, from identified problem to recognized expert, is one of the most powerful things you can do for a teenage boy, especially, and it costs nothing. It just requires you to genuinely not know something and genuinely let them teach you. The third thing was visibility of progress. Baby chicks grow fast, visibly, weekly, fast. And then they started laying eggs. And then we started selling eggs to neighbors. And my son started tracking the numbers. How many eggs per day, which hen was laying, what the feed cost versus what the eggs brought in. He made a small profit in month 2 and treated it with the seriousness of a business owner. Because it was a business, his business. Pattern interrupt. The question you actually need to answer. Okay, I need to stop for a second because I want to ask you something, and I want you to actually sit with this before I go on. When your teenager does something well, genuinely well, how often do they find out you know about it? I'm not talking about report cards or sports trophies. I'm talking about the small things. The time they figured something out on their own. The time they helped a sibling. The time they knew more about something than you did and you could have said so, but you didn't because the moment passed, because dinner was ready, because you were tired. The research on adolescent motivation is really clear that teenage brains are especially sensitive to what developmental psychologists call competence feedback, the feeling of being recognized as capable by someone whose opinion matters. And for most teens, the person whose opinion matters most, whether they'd admit it or not, is still a parent. My son didn't fall in love with chickens. He fell in love with being good at something in front of me. The chickens just gave him a stage. So before you invest in a single raised bed or a single bag of chicken feed, think about what your teenager is already good at or could become good at, and ask yourself honestly, have I built a stage for that yet? That's the question that actually determines whether any of this works. The exact setup, what I built and what it cost. All right, let's get practical, because I know you came for this part too. I started with 3 things, and I added to it over time. I want to be specific about what we started with because I've told this story in parenting groups, and every time someone says, That sounds amazing, but I could never, and I want to make the barrier as low as possible. The first thing we built was a small raised bed, but different from my first attempt. This time, it was my son's raised bed. He chose the dimensions, he chose what to grow, he was responsible for it. I had my own separate bed, so I wasn't competing or hovering. His bed, his decisions, his failures and successes. I told him I wanted to grow hot sauce and needed to know which peppers would work. Could he figure that out? He ordered seeds online with his own money 2 days later. The second thing was 3 hens. We live in a suburb. Most suburbs allow up to 6 hens with no permit. You'd be surprised. We spent about $180 total. $40 for a second-hand coop from Facebook Marketplace, $60 for 3 pullets from a local feed store, $80 for the first month's feed and supplies. My son built the run extension from scrap wood with YouTube as his teacher. It took him a weekend. He was frustrated twice and proud once, and the proud once was the part I made sure to say something about out loud. The third thing was a composting system, a $0 addition because we used a pile in the corner. This one is underrated as a gateway. It is endlessly interesting to teenagers who like biology, it's genuinely useful, it produces visible results, and it requires zero maintenance beyond occasionally turning it. We started using the compost on both our beds in month 2, and my son told his friends about the black gold like it was a discovery he'd made himself, which, in a way, he had. 6 weeks in is when I took the second photo. He's outside, crouched over the chicken run, completely absorbed, phone nowhere in evidence. I didn't arrange it. I didn't prompt it. He just went outside after school and started talking to his chickens. The 4 alternatives if chickens aren't your option. I promised you this, so here it is quickly. The psychological mechanism that made the Homestead work, real stakes, teenager as expert, visible progress, can be replicated with any of these. A worm bin, dead serious. A contained vermicomposting system is cheap, requires daily feeding, produces measurable outputs, and has a learning curve steep enough to make expertise feel real. I know 3 kids who got obsessed. All of them started with, "This is disgusting," and ended with a science project. Mushroom growing. A $30 oyster mushroom kit has a 2-week grow cycle, visible daily progress, and produces something you can eat or sell. It requires specific conditions, humidity, indirect light, particular temperatures, which means the teenager has to monitor and adjust. The problem solving is real. The harvest is fast and dramatic and edible. A weather station and data log. This one is for the teen who won't touch anything biological. A basic outdoor weather station runs about $40. You ask them to track weather patterns for your garden or your neighborhood, build a spreadsheet, make predictions. You treat their data seriously, you refer to it. You ask them to explain the anomalies. Or, and this is the one that surprises people, a fire pit with responsibility. An older teen who is given genuine responsibility for building, tending, and safely extinguishing a fire on a regular basis will often find it deeply satisfying. Fire requires presence. It requires you to put the phone down physically. And it has real stakes that are obvious to everyone. All 4 of these use the same mechanism, something real, something alive or dynamic, something that dies or fails without them, and something where they get to be the expert. The backyard is the venue. That mechanism is the actual thing. What happened to my son? I want to finish with where we are now, because I don't want this to sound like a fairy tale. My son did not become a different person. He still uses his phone too much sometimes. We still have occasional arguments about dinner table rules. He's a teenager. That's what teenagers do. But something real shifted. He has a sense of ownership over something in the physical world. He knows how to build a thing that works. He knows how to care for a living thing consistently over time. He knows what it feels like to produce something. Food, income, knowledge, from effort and attention. Those are not small things. Those are, I would argue, some of the most important things. And he built them himself, in our backyard, between September and March, while I mostly stayed out of his way and made sure he knew I saw. The phone is still there, but it's competing now. And for the first time in 3 years, it doesn't always win. Here's the thing I want you to take from this video, underneath all the practical stuff. We spend so much time trying to pull our teenagers away from something, away from the phone, away from the room, away from the passivity and the disconnection. And I understand why. I lived in that fight for 3 years, but pulling them away never worked for me. What worked was building something worth moving toward. Not a structured activity, not a scheduled family time, a real thing with real stakes, where my son had genuine authority and genuine responsibility, and where I was willing to be the student instead of the teacher, for long enough that he could become the expert. The homestead was almost accidental. What wasn't accidental was the decision to put him in charge of something that mattered, and then get out of the way. You can do that with a worm bin. You can do it with 3 chickens. You can do it with a mushroom kit on your kitchen counter. The vehicle matters less than you think. The ownership is everything. If any of this landed for you, if you found yourself thinking about which of those options fits your teenager, here's what I want you to do. Don't buy anything yet. Before you buy anything, have one conversation. Tell your teen you're thinking about starting something in the backyard, or the balcony, or the kitchen counter, and you need someone who can figure out how to do it right because you definitely can't do it alone. Ask them if they want to look into it. Don't tell them why. Don't mention the phone. Don't connect it to anything they're doing wrong. Just ask. Then come back and tell me in the comments what they said. Because a lot of teens say yes to that question when they've been saying no to everything else, and I want to hear about it. And if you have a partner who thinks this sounds too small to make a real difference, send them this video. Not with a comment, just send it. Because the resistance I hear most from partners is, they're not going to care about a garden. And what I want them to hear is that it's not about the garden. It's about putting a teenager in charge of something alive and getting out of their way. That idea takes 10 minutes to understand, and it's worth both of you hearing it at the same time. Subscribe if you want to see where this series goes next, because next week I'm covering the specific conversation framework that gets teenagers to actually talk during those side-by-side moments, not perform talking, not give you one-word answers, but actually open up. It's a counterintuitive method. It's based on research from hostage negotiation of all places, and it works on teenagers startlingly well. I'll see you then.